All right, let's go ahead and get started. Hi, everybody. I am TJ. I am the Director of Communications and Program Operations at the Elections Group. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, the Elections Group is a nonpartisan election administration consulting firm that partners with state and local election officials who are looking to implement new programs or improve processes for voters and other stakeholders. We're a team of election experts who support election professionals through collaboration, thought leadership, and elevating best practices. At the Elections Group, we've all worked in election offices, so we know firsthand the challenges that many of you face. We use that real world experience to help you solve challenges. I'd like to begin today with our webinar by giving the panelists the opportunity to introduce themselves. We'll go in alphabetical order by last name just to make things complicated. So we'll actually start with Jesse before going to Tonya and then finishing with Tasmin. Go ahead, Jesse.
Thank you so much, TJ, for having me, and so good to be here to have this timely discussion. My name is Jesse Harris, and I am the CEO and founder of Election Care Solutions, which is a partisan or nonpartisan, rather, consulting firm that typically works with Georgia counties to assist them in their poll worker management and best practices improvements. Recently, I was with the Georgia Secretary of State as Deputy Elections Director, and previously from there in Georgia, Gwinnett County as Assistant Elections Supervisor over voter registration, absentee by mail, and advance voting. And I'm so happy to be here to have this discussion.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I too, like Jesse, am excited to be here and be part of this panel. So my name is Tonya Pearce. I am currently the Training and Special Projects Manager for the Orange County Registrar of Voters office in Southern California. I've been working as part of the training team since 2020 and have helped grow and develop and have enjoyed training our poll workers and other, been tasked with other assignments having to do with elections ever since. And I am just excited to help learn as much from you as you can hopefully learn from me.
And hi, I'm Tasmin Swanson with the Center for Civic Design. We are a nonpartisan nonprofit, and we work with election offices all over the country to design best practices to remove barriers at every stage of the voter journey. So we bring expertise in UX that includes user research, usability testing, plain language, accessibility, experience designing forms, web applications, etc., to tackle all of the challenges that voters encounter throughout the elections process, and all of the challenges that election administrators also tackle as they strive to provide excellent election services.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I am going to just kind of jump into the questions for today's topic, which is obviously innovations in poll worker or election worker management. Just so everybody knows, I think we may hear election worker, we may hear poll worker, we may hear election judge. There's lots of different terms that folks across the country use to refer to election workers, poll workers, election judges. I think in this case, what we're referring to are the folks who generally are temporary workers who come and help your office on election day or during early voting to facilitate the voting process. So with that, I'd like for our panelists just to tell us a little bit about their experience either training election workers as county level or state level election officials, creating resources for election officials, or I know in at least one case, we have someone who actually served as an election worker. So if we can actually start with Tasmin on this one, tell us a little bit about your experience. What makes you excited about this topic?
I love this topic. I don't know if I was who you were talking about, but I have served as a poll worker in my home state of Maryland for a couple of election cycles. And it's one of my favorite days of the year, I have to say, or of a couple of days of the year. So personally, very excited about this topic and have seen the difference that good training can do in making me as a poll worker feel confident and empowered. And then CCD as a whole has done research on poll workers and polling places many times over the course of the last decade and beyond. So we last year published a toolkit all about designing poll worker manuals, which we think are one of the most critical pieces of supporting poll workers in their training and on election day. And the heart of that toolkit, we were really thinking about, we want poll workers to feel confident. And that means they need manuals that support them in answering questions that they might run into and empower them to feel confident while they're doing their job, both being able to, do the routine stuff and know how to navigate unexpected situations. So that toolkit, we brought all of our best plain language and information design principles together to create a 3-part toolkit. We've got a template in Microsoft Word that has a range of page layouts to make it really easy to, if you're starting from scratch. We've got a how-to guide for how to work in Microsoft Word, because that can be a little bit of a beast, especially when you're working with like massive documents. How do you get it to do what you want it to do? It can be a deceptively complicated program to work in. And then we have a best practice guide that has tools and tips for a range of topics, including how to how to create strong navigation, how to use images effectively, and how to write instructions in a way that's going to support someone in actually using. Really quickly, I'll share the link to the resource, to the toolkit, as well as I'm sure talk about it much more over the next, 40 minutes, 50 minutes that we've got together. But that toolkit was based on research that CCD has done over the past decade into poll workers and what makes them successful, based on analyzing a bunch of existing manuals from across the country to see what currently is happening that looks really good. Conversations with the elections group, TJ and all of his wonderful colleagues, personal experience, and then also feedback from a couple of real election offices of different sizes across the country who were testing out the toolkit in real time as we were developing it. So it really is a collaboration of a lot of really great minds.
Thank you, Tasmin. I was trying to put the link to the toolkit in the chat. If you don't mind doing that, I see we got one question for it. Let's go to Tonya with the same question.
Sure, thank you. So like Tasmin, one of my favorite parts about this work is actually training. Before I started with the Registrar of Voters, as a manager, that was one of my passions in the private sector, is training and developing employees. So when I had the opportunity to take what I loved and be part of the voting process, I started out as a trainer and got the opportunity to not only teach the poll workers, but I was also able to go out in the field and assist them with the voting process, provide further assistance, extra coaching and training out in the field, and then was able to help manage and develop and further implement the technology and the direction and vision of our Registrar of Voters office as part of the training management. And one of the things I love is just really being able to see the poll workers' confidence grow as they come in and they learn the different processes. They are, whether they are new to elections or they have been passionate and have done this for a number of seasons, the excitement and the engagement that we get to have and interact with the different poll workers when they come into different training classes, the confidence and that we get to instill in them so that they can feel confident about what they're doing out in the field. They can give our voters confidence. It's definitely a rewarding process. I also love the fact that we get to just really be that kind of support and help them to the coworkers to understand that they're not alone, especially with the different the political climate that has been happening over the past couple of election cycles. You know, you'll see a lot of coworkers that might either be apprehensive or cautious, you know, are nervous about, you know, can they really do this job? And so what I like to instill in my team is, you know, we're here to, you know, not only make sure that they can do the job, but make sure that by the end of the day, by the end of their training, that they understand that they're not alone. They have a whole network of people behind them that are here to, you know, support them, provide them the assistance that they need. And they know where to find those tools and resources because, you know, there's so much that goes into elections nowadays that we don't expect everybody to be experts, but we do focus on the basics and, you know, where can I find the tools? Where can I get those questions so that I can feel confident when I'm interacting with those voters?
That's excellent. All right, Jesse.
Yes, just like my co-panelists, I too have pretty much served in all three capacities, and I'm very grateful for that experience. It was very progressive, if you will. I started as a poll worker in LA County with my mom when she was a poll worker manager, and she brought me in and told me to do my civic duty, and I loved every aspect of it. And then when I started getting into the elections work after college, that's when I started creating manuals for poll workers. And knowing the experience that I had as serving as a poll worker really informed the work of creating manuals. And then when I get to, you know, the county level supervisor or supervisorial positions as well as the state, I found myself actually training election workers, or training the trainer of those poll workers. And so that added a different layer and a different understanding of how to approach, how to research, how to incorporate every aspect of elections training into this, let's say, pocket-sized manual, if you will, because election day, it appears so grand, so big, so much stuff is happening, so much stuff is going on, and then you have this, what, a couple of little, not even 100 sheets of paper in a manual that is supposed to tell you how to operate this big day. And so coming from that perspective and having the county knowledge and then going to the state and understanding what the counties needed really positioned me well to incorporate training programs and solutions and innovations, if you will, especially after um, COVID and the use of information technology as well as virtual meeting space like this to where you can really capture the entire state and make sure that they receive the same information and digest the same information so that they can be uniform in their responses to Georgia's electorate. And so I am really, really excited about my progression through the elections ecosystem and how it has placed me in a position to be always looking at advancements, always looking at improvements on election poll workers. I just recently did a stint with one of our counties here where I went in and looked at their poll worker program from A to Z, filled in the gaps for them, even designed a trainer model for them so that their staff wasn't so bombarded while they're over here trying to figure out logic and accuracy testing and equipment allocation. They also cannot take away from those very judiciary responsibilities to train poll workers. And so utilizing staff, utilizing extra help uh, to kind of make a robust training program for their poll workers. And so that's my experience that I'm very happy to share.
That's excellent. We're gonna turn our first question, well, not first question, but our first directed question to Tonya. Tonya, you know, I think that Orange County, California is always at the cutting edge of election training techniques and technology. I know when I got to visit your office, I saw the vote center lab where you all actually do interactive training in a setup that is very similar to what election workers will see on election day or during early voting. I know Orange County is a place where if you're an election official and you have election warehouse envy, if you want to call it that, then Orange County is not a good place to go because you'll just be envious of what's happening and all the great things that you all are doing in Orange County. So all of that is a roundabout way of asking, what are some of the cool and exciting things in addition to the lab that you're doing in Orange County right now that folks should consider doing in their own jurisdictions?
Oh, thank you, PJ. So in addition to the Vote Center Lab, which was something that evolved out of, how we rethink and design poll worker training as a result of COVID. And it's definitely been something that's very beneficial, not only to our elections office, but to the poll workers. One of the things that we do is to support our voters who need translation services or might be interested in translation services is we have what's called a language translation tablet that allows voters and our poll workers to connect with our in-house translation team for the federally mandated languages. It's a communication that they can communicate with the in-house translation staff who's fully versed on the election code and the procedures of the vote center, be able to engage and interact and answer any questions or help that person in the voting process in their language of their choice. That tablet also can be used for ASL translation services as well. And for the language translation services, it's a Zoom interface. So they can not only can listen, but they can also have that face-to-face interaction, just like you would in a regular Zoom meeting, or if you're interacting in ASL. For the if someone comes in with speaking a language that is either that's outside of the federal mandated languages that we support, via that we do partner with Language Line. So we're able to make sure that if anybody, no matter what language they speak, whether they're comfortable speaking or getting their election materials in English, if they prefer it in get assistance in a language, we're there to make sure that we can support them and meet the voter where they're at. We also do put a lot of thought in our accessibility needs. So to meet voters at all levels of ability, we offer curbside voting for voters who are unable to make it inside of a vote centers. We can meet them out and help them assist them voting at their vehicles, so where they're comfortable at is one thing that we do. Our election services department does a lot of work when they do our site visits and when they're selecting our vote center locations, make sure that each location meets a rigorous checklists and qualifications to make sure that all of our locations are accessible for any type of voter that might come to visit them as well. And how that transitions into poll worker training is we make sure that each poll worker understands what what's available at their vote center. We make sure that they understand how to use the different technologies that a voter might come in and looking for, where to find the different accessibility guides. One of our equipment that we have is a electronic ballot marking device. So that also helps to assist voters with disabilities, so if you have visual impairment or auditory impairment, or if you need to use a tactile device, you can mark your ballot without having to use a pen. So that also helps provide assistance. And, we're always thinking of with a mindset of how can we best serve the voters? What kind of voters are in our communities? Where can we meet the voter where they're at to make that process smooth and comfortable for everyone across the board?
And Tonya, before we go on to Jesse, can you tell us a little bit, just to go back to an original point, a little bit about the training lab? Yes. And I kind of glossed over that. What does that look like? Walk me through it. What your election workers see.
Yes, so our training lab, like I said, it evolved and was born out of the COVID or changing from for our COVID model. And what it is, it's basically like a life-size model of a vote center. So you come into this lab and it's like you are at your actual vote center. The poll worker in our training classes will learn how to set up the voting lab for the different stations, read the site diagram to make sure that they understand how each station is supposed to look, making sure that when it's all set up and looking at it from a voter point of view, that everything is accessible. They will be able to practice each attendant role at the different stations, get comfortable with how the devices work, from our poll books to our ballot printing devices, because we print ballots on demand, as well as how to interact and assist voters and show the different features of our ballot marking device for those who need the accessibility devices. They'll learn how to operate and get comfortable with the language tablet, as well as how to interact with voters when they're finally casting their ballot. We put them through different real world scenarios on the different types of voters that would come into a typical polling place, so that they understand how to interact with each different type of voter from a customer service standpoint, and making sure that they are delivering our expected level of service that we expect from them, that they're comfortable. We have some generic scripts that, goes over the key points that we want to make sure that each voter receives. So they practice the scripts, they practice how to interact with not just, your regular, easy customers or easy voters, but the voters who might even have issues or might have be hesitant with misinformation. We do some de-escalation situations that might arise during the voting period, whether that's handling misinformation or interacting with a voter who, where our system says that they might have already voted, or a voter who hasn't registered. We can't find them on our database. How to interact with that, how to make sure that the voter and the public understands that we're here to allow them to vote. It's not our job to determine eligibility. If they come in and their intent is to vote, then we have these different tools and paths and avenues to get that person a ballot if that's what they're coming in here to do. That's probably one of the biggest things that we stress is, if somebody's here and that's what their intent is to do, then we're going to use the tools and the resources that we can provide to get them to what they want to do today, and how can we want to partner with them. Not, it's not their job to determine eligibility, because we obviously don't have as many hours or, in the day to train them on the ins and outs of, what goes into that. But they also learn the security process, because we have multi-day voting. So they learn how to secure the ballots at the end of the night, how to reconcile, how to do the different chains of custody to make sure that our each voting place in our elections maintain a secure chain of custody. So it's really just like a day in the life of an actual poll worker at a voting center is what they go through.
Hey, Tonya, I see one question in the Q&A that we'll get to. We'll get to most of the questions in the Q&A at the end, but if you can just very quickly answer, number one, how long are your training sessions? And then how many folks do you cycle through in each session?
Yes, so our hybrid model is a online training as well as an in-person hands-on practice class. So our online training is about 8 hours or less. And then we have 8 hours of in-person practice. And we cycle through, let's see, we've grown to have 3 vote center labs. So we cycle through about 150 poll workers a day. And we've trained anywhere between 1,200 to 1,800 poll workers in any given election cycle. So it's probably about 1 to 2 months of training classes, 6 days a week, 3 to 4 different classes running at a time.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for that. Jesse, we're going to go over to you. I think you've mentioned the really interesting and valuable perspective you bring, which is that you were both a state level election official, someone who was training the trainer, but you were also a county level election official. You've seen all sorts of training, good, bad, and whatever. Tell us about some of the cool things that you either facilitated yourself or saw other counties facilitating through your work.
Absolutely. In my work, I basically saw, like you said, everything. I saw the good, the bad, and the not so pretty, if you will, when it comes to election workforce development. And so, through my progression, when I first started in this ecosystem, it was more like a cattle call, right? If you can breathe and you have hands, we need you, right? And so, what I noticed is that everybody, if you're considered a poll worker, regardless of roles, if you're a check-in clerk, if you're a runner, a monitor, a manager, assistant manager, everyone's in the same class. We quickly found out that that's a no-no because when you give all this information, um, which is very good information, but not every role in the polling location needs to know it. Maybe they need to know a little information to know how to ask a question or direct a voter, if you will, but they shouldn't be engulfed in understanding everything that the poll manager does, right? And so as we take those issues and change them into opportunities, we look at creating multiple courses for the different roles that you find in the elections poll worker, in the poll worker environment, right? In the polling location. And so that all starts with planning and it also starts with communicating. And so what I've learned and what I found at the county level is that we started using our HR and our public communications team to actually do the recruitment level work for us because we're elections folks, we're not recruiters. We're elections folks, we're not HR directors. And so we know how to train you once you get in, but the recruitment, we were missing a piece there. And so with that, um, we saw an increase in poll worker recruitment. And through an application process, we were able to ask questions about what was your previous role? Because let's take it for what it is. Our elections workforce throughout the nation is ranging 60 and over, right? We are missing a lot of generational gaps, if you will. And so you have to understand your average age of your poll worker, their demographics, so that you can know how to best serve them. Because if you prepare training for, high school students, that may not translate well to a 60 or 75-year-old. And so you have to ask questions about what did you do in your past career? If you were a store clerk, okay, let's try to put you into check-in, a customer service role, because we don't look at voting services as customer service. And so I've learned how to use that language and infiltrate it into daily conversation. So, you know, just not voter services, we're providing a customer service. And when we look at it through that lens, we're able to build manuals and we're able to build products and training methods to best support the poll worker and also the voter. And so it's about timelining, planning well in advance, um, training observation. So once you built this method and this model, um, going into the field and observing and seeing what was learned. Also, like Tanya said, we do simulations where we throw everything that the warehouse drops off for a polling location and just leave it there. We have everybody come in after they've been engrossed and trained and they've been given their particular assignments. And then they get in the room that morning and say, what do we do? So now you see that there's this of what was taught in the classroom and what you're supposed to do the day before election day when you set up in the morning of election day. So now that gives you opportunity to take a step back, observe, recalibrate, and then write training material in language that will make sure that your poll workers know what to do when they're there by themselves. that morning or the night before. And so those are the types of things that um, I implemented. Also at the there was no such thing as a learning management system, and I was able to uh, work with a vendor that provided a learning management system where we got the state certification program all into a learning management system where we can track people's attendance, where we can track where they are on their modules and then follow them through uh, their completion and seeing where some information is just not catching. And then we're able to reassess and reevaluate and make a different approach to the solution. Because we're not here, and I want to put that out there, we're not here to criminalize anybody for doing something wrong. We are here to serve as compliance partners to make sure that you have the tools that you need in order to be successful.
That's excellent. I heard a little bit of your state level election official coming out at the end there, Jesse. That was good. I liked it. I'm going to turn it to Tasmin. Tasmin, you know that I love many Center for Civic Design isms, or CCD isms as I call them. Bite snack meal, I think, is my favorite. There's also mindset, skill set, tool set. That's another favorite one. But going back to bite snack meal, can you highlight, well, first, can you tell the audience what I'm actually talking about? But then highlight after that how the manual resource that you shared can be used to support that idea.
Yeah, I love this question. I love Bite Snack Meal. So, Bite Snack Meal is a content strategy framework, which just means it's a strategy to get the right amount of information to the right people at the right time. Too much information is really overwhelming, and too little information leaves people with questions. But it's hard to know what too much and too little means for different people because people have different learning styles and process information in different ways. So it's just a way of breaking down. You've got a chunk of information you want to share with people. I'm going to put this information on social media. I'm going to put this information on the website. I'm going to put this information in a written document, and to help you think through strategically how you share information. I can also drop a link to an article that goes into more detail about it. So when it comes to actually, let me say quickly, this probably goes without saying, bite is that small piece of information that gives you that critical next step. Snack adds a little bit more context. It might be, a half page or a page on a website. And then a meal is everything, including, information about particular situations, um, the legal language, like all of the stuff that anyone might need. So when it comes to poll worker manuals, you can think of the manual as being the meal in a lot of cases. And when you sit down to a meal, I like to talk about the analogy. When you sit down to a meal, if everything is there on the table at once and just the host is like, take more food, take more food, take more food, it's really overwhelming. But you can have a long feast, you can have a multi-course meal and break it down in a way that where you don't leave the table feeling sick to your stomach by doing it in courses, having, space between different plates coming out, thinking about, having your first course, your meal, and then waiting some time before the dessert. So you can apply all of those same thought processes to designing your manual, and that's going to make it a lot more navigable and easy to use by your poll workers. So thinking about adding a table of contents, using footers and headers on the page to help people understand where they are, strong hierarchy, and having a consistent way of laying out different pages so that when someone turns to a new page, they instantly understand, oh, here's the title, here's the, checklist, things like including white space on the page so that you've got a moment to breathe instead of being confronted with a wall of text. These are all ways of adding more structure to support someone in using your manual. Um, Snacks for manuals might be your job aids, things like checklists or sample dialogue to use at different stations. I know Tonya was talking about practicing those. If you've got your sample dialogues printed out, like give them to your voters. That's an excellent job aid. Um, and those snacks, those job aids might be inside your manual. They may also be separate documents that are printed out and live at the different voting stations on during the voting process. And then the bite, I like to think of as the North Star. What is the one thing that you want your poll workers to remember if everything else goes out of their mind in the middle of a stressful day? So you want to communicate that North Star really strongly in training and also have it in the manual. So that might be, at opening, your North Star might be have enough equipment set up to open the polls on time. You just want your poll workers to repeat that to themselves as they're going through. And that's going to help your head poll worker, your chief judge, whatever you call them, make decisions so that they are not calling you and clogging up your phone line. They can reassign people as needed to say, ooh, looks like e-poll books are running into a problem. Don't worry about getting all 8 of them set up. Get one of them set up, and I'm going to reassign my best poll worker from another station over to you to help. And they know what the bar is before they call you in the office. So they know, ooh, we can't get all of the equipment set up. That is my signal to, you know, to call in and report this as an emergency. Um, yeah, so that's bite snack meal as it applies to poll worker manuals.
And I really love the toolkit because I think, you know, you look at your training apparatus if you're an election official, and it probably doing anything to change it probably feels like eating an elephant. But I think that the toolkit really gives an intentional roadmap for, maybe you don't change everything during this election, but you can kind of go ahead and begin to change things. And I just think that that's incredibly helpful. I think uh, using strategies like bite snack meal and keeping those in your mind are incredibly valuable. So thank you so much for that, Tasmin. We've got about 20 minutes left, and I do want to get to audience Q&A, but I do want to ask a question, which is one of the things I really love about the election workforce, especially as it relates to election workers or poll workers, election judges, is the variety of folks that you get to come help on election day. I think, or during early voting, I think that one of the biggest strengths in the workforce is in that diversity. I know in my former jurisdiction, we would have, college deans with truck drivers. We'd have tenured professors of chemistry with stay-at-home parents. Usually the folks who were the easiest to deal with weren't the college deans or the tenured professors of chemistry. And they actually, in many cases, weren't even the best election workers. But that's an aside. Thinking about how you teach teach and manage such a wide variety of folks, what are some things that you would share with election officials who are going through that process? And we can start with Jesse.
Definitely some of the methods or techniques you can use would definitely be to have an active role in, let's say, recruitment, right? It starts there, and having that strategy, if you will, of poll worker recruitment, poll worker retention, and poll worker recognition. Uh, and so what I would say is having a stakeholdership in retention, or in recruitment rather, will help you identify where to best place your poll workers. Just because, so sorry, just because, um, someone may be great at making sure that a ballot is placed into the scanner and give a I voted sticker. Um, then that person may not be well equipped to handle issues like in the line outside. They may not be equipped to handle an escalated voter at check-in. And so knowing people's what they bring, knowing their values, right, will help you place them better. That goes into customer service because you want to strategically place people that will get your voter in and get your voter out and just keep it going until polls close. That's all that we want to do on the election day. And so uneventful election days is what I always pray and give to our election officials throughout the country. Another thing would be hmm, I would think when it comes to retention, just making sure that you strategize with um, your manual, just like Tasmin said, with the bite snack meal approach, making sure that you have everything that you need in your manual, and then breaking out these appendix or catchphrases, last minute reminders, images, if you will, that is going to really permeate in the poll worker's mind on the day of service. A lot of jurisdictions have advanced voting, so that gives you a lot of opportunity to catch things, if you will, before election day. And then, of course, we all have election day. And so, what we want to, I think Tasmin said it, I'm not quite sure, maybe Tanya, but we want to equip them enough. You don't have to know everything, but we want you to know where to find it. Um, like I used in one jurisdiction where we had tablets, and they were filtered with pre um, answered questions, right? If I have a voter who doesn't have an ID, what do I do? And you can literally go into the tablet, put that, and then all of these different solutions, if you will, or hierarchy processes will come into play that will help you uh, meet the voters' needs. Because it is, let's say, a large jurisdiction, there are 100 plus polling locations. There's only one voter registration office. We can only answer so many calls. We can only provide so much real-time advice. And so doing everything that you possibly can to make sure that they're equipped and prepared would definitely be an advantageous outlet for you.
Thank you, Jesse. We've got about 15 minutes, so I want to give Tonya time to answer that question as the other person who's worked in an election office, and then we'll go on to one more question after this before turning to the Q&A. Go ahead, Tonya.
Okay, thank you. So to piggyback off of what Jesse said, not only what we do have a strong relationship with our recruiting departments. We also are lucky enough in Orange County to have a large returner base, and that's really been our strength when it comes to making poll worker training easier. And when it comes to training, taking into account, the different learning styles. We really just focus on, those little bite size, the repetition, we don't try to stress or focus on getting into the weeds of, the election code or the one-off crazy situations that may or may not happen, those unique voter situations that may or may not happen, but we do show them, should that happen, here's the tools, here are the resources, here's where you can go get help. When it comes to, we call them our vote center leads. So they are at each polling location to help provide that first line of support to the regular poll workers. They do get a little bit more inside training so they know, a little bit more on the whys or those unique situations. But really, when it comes to, the diversity, whether it's, with the learning styles or the age ranges, it's really having that solid relationship with our HR recruiting departments, making sure that when it comes to training, we focus on the basics, and then with understanding that, it's a whole team effort to kind of, when it comes to retention and getting that the returners, you know, to want to come back, that providing that overall experience, and knowing that our goal is to have people to come back and do this long term. Then every time that they come back and assist us with an election, we're building on that skill set. We're, you know, so it's not like we're trying to, or we do our best not to over inundate them with every little thing, but knowing that, you know, it's kind of, elections are unique in that, you know, it's a temporary position, but it's not like it's done every day. So we understand that there's going to be a learning curve. We understand that every student isn't going to be an A student. You're going to get, you know, mostly C students, but the goal is that they're going to come back. The goal is that they are going to build every single time, every single class. They're going to learn something new. We're going to have those repeat aha moments. And then, you know, we're lucky enough to have multi-day voting, and with our first, you know, 10 days, or it's slow enough so that they can also further develop those skills with repetition with each voter that comes in.
Thank you so much for that, Tonya. I love your point about viewing this not as a one-time engagement, but as something that goes on over time where folks can continuously improve. Last question like this before we go to Q&A. I think we all understand, and not everywhere is Orange County. Not everywhere has the resources that Orange County has, but I think that there's tons of stuff that smaller, less resource counties can still learn from Orange County. I'm gonna point this at Tonya, but if other folks have thoughts, please chime in. What would you offer as advice, Tonya, to those jurisdictions that want to do more like you all, but don't have the resources to do it?
I think one of the things that has helped us is we have a lot of really strong community partners, with different language communities, with our community outreach when they go into the different cities, and participate in various outreach programs to get into the community, interacting with our voters, interacting and partnering with community leaders, to making sure we understand what the community is looking for, what they're expecting from us. And really, like Tasmin said, you know, having those, really focusing on those bite-sized nuggets, you know, breaking everything down and looking at your training from a poll worker's point of view. You know, am I making this, you know, that's one of the things that, you know, we have conversations that we have in our office, you know, and are we making this too complicated? You know, what are the basics? You know, at the end of the day, you know, what is it that the poll worker needs to know? What is the focus? And we do focus mostly on customer service. You know, how can we provide the best voting experience for the voters that are coming in and seeing us? And that's just keeping with the basics and really getting those outside perspectives, from not only your poll workers. We do surveys to get their feedback on not only our training program, but their overall experience. How can we improve? Feedback from our community partners, feedback from the different departments within our agencies on, you know, what were the misses, what worked, what didn't work, and just really with the focus of customer service, focus on keeping it simple for the poll workers. I think you'll get there.
Can I jump in with two things that are not with both my CCD hat on and my non-CCD hat on. So I loved hearing about Tonya's and Orange County's labs. Those are so cool to do. But I wanted to give an example of how to do it in a little bit less time. So in my home jurisdiction, Baltimore City, I, as a poll worker, absolutely loved our training this year. So they had a 3-hour training. The first there were about 40, 30, 40, 50, I think was the range of folks, number of poll workers who were being trained at one time. And we had 1 hour of kind of lecture presentation going over the main points, and then 2 hours where we were broken into smaller groups of about 5 to 8 folks in a station, and we had different stations set up around the room. It was a large church basement kind of situation, where you had time at each station as if you were going through the polling place to get hands-on experience with the equipment, setting it up. You only got trained to set up one piece of equipment wherever you started, but then you got hands-on time troubleshooting. And I thought that worked really well in a pretty condensed amount of time. And it was a good foray into a more hands-on interactive style of learning, which I would always go for over presentation lecture, like hands down. The other thing that I've seen happen in Baltimore City recently that I think other offices across the country of different sizes could look at implementing is building up a student poll worker program. It does take a lot of time. I'm not gonna lie, but I think that the effects, both short-term and long-term, are absolutely worth the investment. So Baltimore City is partnering with an organization I'm actually on the board of, Baltimore Votes, to set up a new student poll worker program. We had over 100 students go through this year. They had a dedicated day for training that worked with a school schedule. And it meant that students were able to learn in a not so scary environment around other students and ask those questions, because it can be really intimidating to go in and be interacting with like longtime poll workers. But after that, they're treated just like the rest of the poll workers. And we heard from both students and adults, regular poll workers, that the students were engaged and they were like there and ready, and you're building that workforce. I know that Jesse talked about being a student poll worker. I was a student poll worker. I know at least one clerk in Massachusetts was a student poll worker in 2008, and now they're the city clerk. Like, that is how we build long-term growth and attract like great folks into this profession, as well as build lifelong, civic leaders in all of the ways that we want to. And it's also one of the questions in the chat is around recruitment, going to students, working with schools, that brings in a young, diverse group of poll workers.
That's excellent. And just so folks know, the second, this webinar is supposed to be the first part in the 2-part series. Our next one, we're going to focus on recruitment and retention. So I know we'll touch on a lot of those things and have different examples of that during that one. All right, we're going to turn to the Q&A. We got about 5 minutes left. We're going to do a lightning round, essentially. So I'm going to ask the question, and then one of my esteemed panelists is going to answer the question, but just one of them. So there's no Jeopardy button, but just go ahead if you've got an answer and offer it up. So the first question here is, do you offer digital formats to poll workers? And if so, what kind of measures do you put in place to keep the information secure, if any? Who do we got? Jesse? I know you talked about the LMS in Georgia.
Right. I was actually going to volunteer Tonya, since she's still in the jurisdiction, and there may have been some changes since I left the state. But if you're up to it.
Sure. We do offer digital formats, training formats for our staff. We do utilize an LMS system for our online training, and we have what's called our Vote Center Pass, our program online portal. For security, with our LMS, each student is manually enrolled, so we control who has access. We monitor the access and the process with for our training, our LMS program. So that's how we keep it secured. It's not a website where you can just automatically access it right off the street. That's how we keep it secure and make sure that it's up to date.
Right. Excellent. Next question. This is directed at you, Tonya. Is language line something that you all build into your annual budget? And is it available at polling places?
It is available at polling places. Each of our polling places has a phone that's issued to them, so we don't expect them to use their own personal devices. And yes, that is built into the budget. I would have to refer you to or put you in contact with our our procurement department and our HR department as far as like pricing and stuff like that. But yes.
All right, that's excellent. Thank you for venturing off and answering that. Let's see. This is again directed at you, Tonya. You're our most popular panelist. Are poll workers compensated for the time that they spend in the learning labs?
Yes, all of our poll workers are actually county employees. So they go through a recruitment and background check. So they are paid employees through our county. So any of their training, their online training, and in-person training at the Vote Center Lab is paid.
All right. And I think the one question we have is, what is the product name of the language tablet? That's Language Line, right? Or is that a different one?
No, basically the tablet is just basically an iPad, and then the video conferencing that we use, it's basically a Zoom platform that our IT department has built out and customized to directly connect with the different translator in-house. So it's basically a Zoom application.
Oh, wow. That's excellent. All right. Let's see. Here's a question I think for anybody. Is anyone using outcome-based measures post-election to evaluate whether training was effective?
Yes. So for me at the state level, it's two-part. I build in training analytics, and that was a strategy that came from conversations with stakeholders in and outside of state elections, if you will, and just researching how other companies do customer service surveys. And so building that analytic database and then researching it to actually see what stuck, what didn't take. Also at the state, all counties and cities are required to send returns in. So our training on records retention and filing, if we continue to see that, a provisional sheet is missing out of each jurisdiction's packet, then we know that we failed somewhere when we communicated training. And so making sure that the next go round that we've incorporated that into our training so that we can make sure that we don't have any issues there. And then finally, it would be with like the state election board and looking at all of the violations that were reported on the counties and individuals that violated election law. So basically, that data, seeing what averages, and then building strategic and direct training to tackle that, so we don't see those recurrent violations again.
That's excellent. And I see we are at the end of our time together, and we still have a ton of questions, many of them for Tonya in the chat. I encourage folks, when you get the follow-up email to this, please email back. And Tonya, am I okay to, all of our panelists, is it okay to connect folks who are interested? Very good. I do apologize to everybody for not getting to everything in the Q&A. We'll know for next time to reserve more time for that. But thank you so much for joining our webinar today. Thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you to our participants. We look forward to seeing you for part 2 of this webinar, as well as any other elections group webinars in the future. Thank you and have a great rest of your Tuesday. Thanks, everybody.